O'Reilly. Are your wiper blades chattering, skipping, or squeaking? Don't let streaks or smearing on your windshield compromise your visibility. When it's time to replace your wiper blades, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and see our selection. Our professional parts people will even install your new wiper blades while you wait. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
You know what my favorite text is? A waypoint in the onX Hunt app to a goblin turkey. The list on the onX Hunt app features for chasing turkeys is long, but knowing exact public and private boundaries and land ownership details will help you find more places to hunt, whether that's on public or private. I'll be toting the Hunt app through the spring woods in a few states this year, and I recommend you do the same if you want more turkeys on your table. Also, onX has a special offer for you. Use code BEARGREASE to receive 20% off your membership at onxmaps.com/hunt this spring.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and this is a production of the Bear Grease podcast called the Bear Grease Render, where we render down, dive deeper, and look behind the scenes of the actual Bear Grease podcast. We're going weekly, guys, and I want to explain this very clearly. The Bear Grease podcast is a documentary-style podcast that we release every other week. We are now going to start releasing on this same stream on the Bear Grease podcast what we call the Bear Grease Render. So every other week, you will hear a conversation between me and my buddies where we do just what we said, render down, dive deeper, and look behind the scenes of the actual Bear Grease podcast. So you're going to be hearing from us weekly from now on.
It's been years since I've worked on it. It had gotten pretty bad.
Did you have a decent out hoot?
Years ago, I started to get it. Like, I started to get that there's that certain characteristic about it. But I've been working on it in my truck.
Okay.
You got to get it.
Brent, let's hear your best out hoot. Oh,
hey, that's pretty good. You got the little tremolo
that's
thing
a frisky
at the end.
I've been saving that.
Yeah, man. Very nice. Hey, this is the Bear Grease Render podcast, okay? This is the Bear Grease Render. And the Bear Grease Render, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, the Bear Grease podcast is a documentary-style podcast where we explore all kind of stuff, all kind of interesting stuff, and have these documentary-style podcasts. We do that. We release those every other week. So by the time this comes out, there's going to be like 6 Bear Grease podcasts out. This is the Bear Grease Render, boys. And the Bear Grease Render is every other week. So now the Bear Grease podcast is weekly because every other week we're going to meet and have like a informal conversation that reflects and dissects. Oh, that's good. We're going to use that. Reflects and dissects the Bear Grease documentary style podcasts. Okay.
We're boiling that cabbage down.
That's right. We're boiling the cabbage down, chewing the tobacco thin, as they say.
Yeah.
So before we get started here, where we talk about the what the render is, I want to introduce my guests. Okay. So we are at the the global headquarters of Bear Hunting Magazine and MeatEater South. Okay, how y'all like that?
Yeah, that's nice.
And I have really every single one of you is like, you wouldn't be here if you weren't like super important in my life. And most of you, well, all of you have been involved in some way in either the Bear Grease podcast or in one of the guys' cases, not the Bear Grease podcast, but my former Bear Hunting Magazine podcast.
We won't mention his name.
To my direct left, to my left is my dear friend Brent Reaves.
Yep.
Who could Brent Reaves could teach a doctoral level class. I'm reading this, okay? Brent Reaves could teach a doctoral level class.
He wrote this. He wrote this himself.
Yeah, this is Brent's bio. No, this is my bio on Brent. Brent Reaves could teach a doctoral level class on folksy Southern sayings. And ironically, he has also seen 2 Arkansas mountain lions.
That is correct.
And Brent was also filming when, in 2016, the big color-phased bear in Saskatchewan that's hanging on the wall right over there touched my arrow and sent, Brent was the one, sitting right behind me.
Yeah.
So, Brent, good to have you here.
Good to be here, man.
To Brent's left is Dr. Daniel Rupp, who now that makes 2 times I've called you doctor in your life. And that'll be the last time. I'm going to do it one time. So Dan was on the Acorn podcast, okay? Dan's I'm not even going to get into really what he does, neither with Brent. This is just, when I think of you guys, this is what I think of. Dan has never combed his hair and has a beard like a Viking.
That is true.
And ironically, he himself as well has seen an Arkansas mountain lion.
I have seen it.
Which we'll want to get to later. All right.
I'm going to call that particular podcast I'm going to call it a docudrama.
Yeah. Stirring up controversy.
Me, you, and Gary going to get jackets made.
Yeah.
Believers.
Jackets. Yeah, believers. Okay. And interesting fact about Dan that you guys may not have known, Dan Rupp was the first guest on the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast.
Really?
Did you know that, Dan?
I didn't even know that. I was there?
You were actually... You didn't know we were recording that? No, for real. In British Columbia. Me, you, and Devin Jewell.
Hey.
That was the first one, Dan.
It was a turning point in my life.
Yeah. I can
Where'd you
tell.
Subconsciously, apparently.
Okay, so that's Dan Rupp. To his left is Dr. Malachi Nichols. Now, I call this guy a doctor sometimes because he just has the look.
He earned it.
Yeah, he didn't get his off the internet. No, okay. Now, Dr. Malachi Nichols, here are his credentials.
Okay.
He was on the Bear Grease podcast, episode number 2, the thing about owl hooters.
Yep.
He was the guy that I interviewed about the social science question of correlations and how they can be connected or not. But Dr. Malachi Nichols is a current Arkansas license holder.
That's
okay,
true.
hunting license holder.
Yeah,
he is a
prove it.
Yeah, show us your hunting license, Malachi. There it is. He's pulling it out of his wallet just to prove it. Dr. Malachi Nichols is a one-time.
I can confirm it's real. It's legit.
Oh, he's got the
He's
hard.
also got an Arkansas concealed carry license there.
He's got a hard card. Very nice,
yeah.
and a duck stamp.
I've never
Fancy.
seen one of those.
Okay, Dr. Malachi Nichols is also a one-time coon hunter.
Yep, one time. Yep.
Is that the only hunt you've ever been on, though?
And never got an invitation back.
No, but
Interesting.
here's what I think of when I think of Malachi. He is the only person that has given me the stiff arm on a legit outdoor-related partnership venture request.
Oh, my goodness.
Or no.
I mean, okay, Malachi and I, we've talked about this before publicly, and we've worked it out together privately. So this is not like an offense that I need to go to my brother about.
Is that what today is about?
No. We've already done it, but it's just notable.
Okay.
There's just things that you remember about people that you never forget. No, me and Malachi, we fried fish a couple times together for our wives and families, and we just had a great time. And I was like, man, Malachi loves to fry fish. And we talked about fishing a little bit here and there. Right. And then I was like, likes to fry fish, likes to fish. He's my friend. How about we go in partners on a boat, Malachi? That was my question. Hard no. I mean,
he went from 25 miles per hour to 75 interstate real quick. And
He skipped some stuff, didn't he?
It was like,
So-
I want to get fishing poles first. I want to, I want to take small steps.
Do you want to keep it at his house for your convenience?
Oh, maybe so.
There we go.
Okay.
You're not the first one he's
Okay.
offered this deal to.
Yeah. And then, so to his left is Josh Spielmaker.
Sans Doctor.
Sans Dr. Spielmaker. Okay, true story. I bet none of you know this. True story. 10 years ago, Josh Spielmaker's mustache inspired me to read a book on the Bering Land Bridge. This is not a joke.
Well, that's
10 years ago, Josh Spielmaker's mustache inspired me to read a book on the Bering Land Bridge, which got me interested in early human history and anthropology. And he is a legendary adult onset fly fisherman. No, let me
Fact.
tell you the story. One
Fact.
day, me and Josh were standing there, and I mean, you got to admit, the guy's got a great beard.
Oh my
does.
goodness!
But the
Oh, my
mustache,
goodness.
the way that it was like it was connecting two continents. That's what it felt like. I said, Josh, you got an awesome mustache. And I was like, that reminds me of the Bering Land Bridge. That night, I went home on Amazon and ordered a book that's right up there. And it was all about the Bering Land Bridge. I read the book, was fascinated, and I think about it all the time.
And look at you now.
And now I've tried to emulate your mustache. So,
You're welcome, America.
You're welcome, Misty.
okay, that's Josh. And then our guest of honor,
Wow.
The patriarch.
he's got the chair. My father, Gary Newcomb. Man, so Dad, you've been on. By the time this comes out, you will have been on the Bear Grease podcast a couple of times. Okay, so this is what I think of when I think of Gary Newcomb. Once while in Vietnam, this is a war story, true story. Once while in Vietnam, he reported to his commanding officer wearing only a bath towel after he was summoned to report to the officer while he was in the shower. Okay?
I think that's
That's
fair.
part one. We're going to need a little bit of explanation. Number two,
I don't know if I want to know.
Gary Newcomb is single-handedly credited with keeping the myth of the Black Panther alive in North America. Single-handedly.
Believer.
Dad, give us just a short version of when you reported to your officer in your bath towel.
Well, Vietnam, you're always looking for something to keep your sanity. This little clerk came in and he was like, this is serious. You got to go see the captain. So I just walked out naked with my towel over my shoulder.
Oh, you didn't even
And started heading towards his office. Of course, by the time I got there, I covered myself up. But
To respect.
anyway,
Tarzan reporting his order.
what you were trying to say was, bro, let me at least get out of the shower. Is it that important? That was kind of like
it had to be so important it didn't matter. I was going. So anyway, it was kind of funny at the time.
man. Great. Well, okay, now that we've done proper introductions, let's get down to business here, boys. So the Bear Grease Render is the short version of the Bear Grease podcast where we talk about it. Man, I've had the time of my life building when this comes out, there will be 6 Bear Grease podcasts out. And the podcast is formatted in such a way that it's hard for me to, like, when I get done making one of these, I want to call one of you guys and talk about it. Like, and there's so much more that can be said because we're trying to make it an efficient listen. And so, it's fairly scripted, scripted in the sense that everything is thought out. But it's also, there are sections of informal interviews. But for instance, you will hear interviews on the Bear Grease podcast with experts, with whoever, like Dan Rupp, that we talked for probably an hour, Dan, and I whittled it down to like 17 minutes.
He cut a whole lot of
Yeah,
that
there
out.
was a
That's
lot
what
of-
he did.
that
It
was
was
a lot
pretty
of-
easy. He told me it was pretty easy.
There's a lot of fluff in it. But so like this is going to give kind of me an outlet to like say some other stuff to make corrections. There's a couple of corrections. Man, when you're spouting off this much information, boys, sometimes you get it wrong.
Tall tales.
Tall tales. But it also gives you guys a chance to like talk to me about any perceptions that you have
As the end user. as the end user.
Anything
of this
I could have
podcast.
done better. And so I know all you guys have something to say. We're at a little bit of a disadvantage on the first Bear Grease render because we've already had 6 podcasts come out. Okay. And so as we get on the weekly schedule, there's going to be like one podcast that's going to come out. And so it'll be a little bit more focused. But so on this one, we're just going to kind of hit and miss over the different 6 podcasts that have come out. But what I haven't had a chance to do on the Bear Grease podcast is talk about the name Bear Grease. Do y'all know why it's Bear Grease? Do y'all understand the metaphor? Is the marketing strong enough that you understand the metaphor? This is an open question.
This is the first time
Do you
I'm learning
think-
the name of it.
No.
Brent's like, what are you talking about? Do you have a podcast? You don't understand. So Dad, you,
Bear Grease?
No.
Good. Okay, so you don't understand. No, listen. Bear Grease is literally, I'm holding a jar in my hand right now, is literally the rendered fat of a black bear. Okay. Now put on your deep philosophical thinking caps. Okay. At one time, Bear Grease was a medium of currency, and it was a staple of life on the American frontier. Bear Grease stayed good longer than pork lard. So, like, if you homesteaded in Arkansas or Tennessee or Kentucky or wherever, you would render down this fat, and it would be extremely valuable to you. It was a form of currency. Did you know that an eel of bear grease, that is an archaic unit of measure for bear grease, was the tanned neck hide of a deer sewn together, bear grease poured into it, and then it was sealed up. And an eel of bear grease was like a unit of currency. It is just per chance, boys, that the U.S. dollar isn't nicknamed an eel. Okay? But it's nicknamed a buck because a buck skin was worth about $1 U.S. You follow me?
Wow.
I actually don't know that either.
I'm making that up that bear eel was almost that. It's the same thing.
How much of this are you making up?
Yeah. So, okay, philosophical thinking caps. This at one time was highly important, and everyone would have known about it. Yeah. I mean, this would have been like normal. Like you'd have had it in your house. You'd have had it in your house. You'd have had it in your house.
What about Oil Trough, Arkansas?
Well, that is a
City.
artifact of what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Because it was a city in northern Arkansas that had a processing plant for bear oil, and they shipped that bear oil down the White
It's like
River.
the Fed Reserve.
That's right.
Fort Knox.
Yeah,
I got you.
Yeah.
Clay, you know, the first time I indirectly met you was through a jar of bear grease.
Is that right?
Your daughter came into my class. I was teaching school, and your daughter came into my class. She had a tanned fox hide on her left shoulder.
This is River.
This is
Gotta
a
be
true
real.
story.
Yeah.
True story. Tanned fox hide on her left shoulder and a jar of bear grease. And she just walks into my classroom like nothing's happening.
Was it show and tell or?
Well, it was just a regular day.
Tuesday.
It was Tuesday. She walked in, with this fox hide and this jar of bear grease, and she said, "My dad sent this with me. I'm going to put it on the window. It's supposed to tell us what the weather is going to be like, so I want to know if it's going to rain before we go outside." And she sat down, and it's like I had been in Arkansas like a year, and I'm thinking like, where am I at right now? And that is the first time I indirectly met Clay Newcomb. I've never met him before, and met him through his daughter with a jar of bear
A
grease.
jar of bear grease.
Yep.
That is awesome.
Yep.
So I'd forgotten about that story.
Who in
And I
here didn't
forgot.
know that was River? Nobody.
Yeah, exactly. It was River. And that's why this jar is where it is. This is my weather forecasting jar of bear grease. You see this chart right here? Uh-huh. I'll send you boys home with one of these one day. This is a chart. Is a chart made by Gordon Wimsatt out in New Mexico that you can read the weather off.
Is it
of this.
close?
It's that
Spot
bear
on.
grease changes all the time. It really does. Every single day, it looks different. Okay, so now we've all come together to this point of that bear grease was like this valuable thing, and then now it's not. It's erased from people's memory. I mean, like erased. Like you go and like poll the 330 million people in the United States. I mean, like 0.0000001% would like kind of know what it was.
Yeah.
The Bear Grease podcast is we are exploring things that are forgotten but relevant, searching for insight in unlikely places, like telling the weather off a jar of bear grease. You know where that came from, Malachi?
No idea.
Was the Native
Channel
Americans
7.
Channel 7? Is that where you get your weather? No, Native Americans in the southwestern U.S., they would take the dried and scraped bladder of a deer, pour bear grease in it, and when it dried, it became almost translucent, and you could see through it like a glass jar. And they forecasted the weather based upon the bear grease in that jar. Things forgotten but relevant, insight in unlikely places. And our tagline is, we're going to tell the story of Americans who live their lives close to the land. And so bear grease is a metaphor, something that's forgotten. And man, bear grease, we use it for all kind of stuff. We use it for frying. We use it for pastries. We use it for oil and conditioning leather. We use it for rubbing down gun barrels. We use it for forecasting the weather. You see this bar of soap right here? You can go to the MeatEater.com and see me and Colby Moorhead making this bar of soap out of bear fat. It's animal tallow, lye fat soap. Incredible stuff. If I had more of it, I'd give y'all some, but I don't. And I got to stay clean somehow. But that, I'm telling you, that lye soap is incredible.
Is it in your shower?
You betcha it is.
Really?
I've actually got some
I'll
of it.
send you
I got
some home if you
Colby.
want.
Yeah, I'd like to have some.
feel
I'd like to
incredible.
have something for my time.
Yeah, you want to bring something home?
Wait a minute, we're not getting paid.
Yeah.
This is actually a multi-level marketing.
Wow.
We're all going to be
scenario.
selling this bear soap.
So, guys, that's why I brought you here. You can get in on the ground floor.
Be my
Pyramid
downline.
scheme. You were right.
Yeah.
I actually have some of it in my shower. Colby gave me.
Oh yeah, it's great soap. It's great soap. Good for your skin. Good soap. So you see the metaphor. So like we're like, basically that gives us this broad window to explore all these different things. And for instance, the insight, like inside the Mountain Lion podcast, like that was like the first podcast was called The Myth of the Southern Mountain Lion, which was a really fun podcast where I interviewed a few people that have seen mountain lions, claim to have anyway.
Seen mountain lion.
Yeah. And I interviewed a biologist and I interviewed a psychologist about how people cognitive bias, like it's a wonder I've not seen a mountain lion because my dad believes in Black Panthers. Do you see what the cognitive bias means? If your dad told you there was something there, even if it wasn't,
Do you believe
and I'm
in
going to give you a
oxygen?
chance
Your
to
dad.
defend yourself, Dad.
Do you believe
But-
in oxygen?
I do.
Oh, okay. Can you see it?
No.
I saw a mountain lion. Gary, did you see one?
I saw a Black Panther.
Brent Reaves, did you question, after you listened to that podcast, did you question yourself?
I question my friends. My circle of friends and the people that I call. It's a very small.
Reevaluated your relationships.
The dynamic of that relationship. I thought, who is this psychologist? What's he going to cognitive? What was it?
Cognitive
again?
bias.
And the problem is no one ever told me there wasn't mountain lions in Arkansas. No one ever told me there was.
and so you're saying you're totally unbiased and the one you saw was just like for real.
Yes,
Are you convinced you saw it?
100%.
Was it behind bars or on a chain or right outside of a
It
restaurant?
was
or what?
wearing a pink tutu.
Okay.
No,
I have
I
witnesses.
saw it.
I told you in the podcast. It wasn't like I was by myself. Daniel,
Same
you
here.
you had a
My
witness?
wife was with me.
Well, there you go.
Hey, you don't have to defend yourself. I'm just kidding. The point is, well, I don't believe you, but the insight though, like, so I'm trying to describe like the Bear Grease podcast because somebody could be listening to this and never even heard the Bear Grease podcast. The insight came inside
Like
of
two people.
like we explored this thing. Like there's this artifact, and I like that word of from when lions were actually here. Because indisputably, there are a lot of people that claim they see mountain lions that didn't, and I absolutely 100% believe every one of you. I said it on the podcast too. I said I'd punch somebody in the teeth if they didn't believe Gary
Because at the
Newcomb or
very
Brent
end,
Reaves.
they'd quit listening by then.
Yeah,
didn't
you
Yeah.
didn't say anything about Daniel.
Well,
though.
Dan's wasn't on there.
Okay.
But the insight came in just looking at how we want to believe our brother. Like, do you remember at the end? Like, I came to the
Sure.
conclusion. Like, and I didn't fabricate that. Like, after I talked to all these people, like, it was like the redeeming factor of it all was that, like, the way we've survived, and it's natural for me. I trust Brent Reaves. If he tells me he sees a mountain lion, then by golly, he saw a mountain lion. And I'm just giving you guys a hard time.
So basically, what you're saying is that you can love your friends even when they're delusional,
even if they're liars.
And okay, the deeper thought is that what has made humans successful in the earth is that we want to trust our brother.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like a mechanism, like, because if I can't, it's a mechanism of trust. Like, I want to believe you, and then I think that has produced a lot of false mountain lion, sightings from people who maybe had some, thought they saw
Hadn't
one.
been vaccinated,
hadn't been vaccinated against lions.
Yeah.
Correct.
Very good, Brent.
Yeah. Now, Dad, okay, I've credited you with keeping the myth of the Black Panther alive. How do you feel about that?
I think it's wonderful. I mean, it's nice that you put out the truth. I mean, it's against science, but I mean, who are you going to trust?
Do you
Your
believe
dad?
it because you saw one?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's any of your business.
Can
Scientists
neither
used to say the world
confirm
was
nor
flat.
deny.
When I go down to Aunt Ollie's, she lives in a dog trot house with trees over the road, and at night we are awakened by a screaming Black Panther. I mean, who are you going to trust?
Yep.
Aunt Ollie.
Tell us what a dog trot house is.
It's got a porch right down the middle. One side your kitchen, living room, one side your bedroom. Big trees out. I mean, it was an amazing place.
It's the architectural style that they used to use before air conditioning.
Keeps it cool.
Yeah, so you would cook on one side and then you would sleep on one side.
Yeah, and the little community was almost as neat as the house. It was Bucksnort.
Oh yeah, right outside.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Fordyce.
Yeah, Bucksnort.
Yeah.
Know right where it's at.
I wonder where that name
A lot of panthers there. A lot of them.
Hey, listen.
It's Panther country.
Now, Panther country. Panther country. Hey, listen though. No, I 100% like they're a legitimate mountain lion. I mean, the biologist even confirmed it. I mean, like if you listen to the whole
Why are we even talking about this?
I'm just giving you a hard time.
The man confirmed it.
Yeah, there are mountain lions here. Now, Black Panthers. Now, that is where I draw the hard line. And neither of these guys have claimed to have seen a Black Panther. Dad's just joking.
I've just heard him.
And you just could tell by the sound that it was black?
Absolutely.
So, but you would be shocked at the number of grown men who, after listening to that whole podcast and listening to Myron Means saying, from the position of science, there has never been documented a melanistic mountain lion ever by science.
Did you get some documentation in the mail, in the email?
You wouldn't believe the grown men that message me. Some of them friends of mine. And they're like, Clay, I listened to the podcast. It was awesome. I believe every word of it. I've seen a Black Panther, though. I mean, it rocked people's boats, man. I mean, I think it splits families. Like this idea of the Black Panther.
When Myron Means got off of that interview, was he like, "There's really Black Panthers"?
Yeah. He was like,
He reached over, turned the tape recorder off.
He was like, the record. He was like, cut it, Clay. He was like, I killed one last year. No. I had two different people claim that their fathers. Well, one of them claimed that their father had shot at a Black Panther. One of them claimed that their father killed a Black Panther, killed it with a bow. I'm telling you, this guy's like, I know this guy, and I'm like, send me a picture. And if he's listening now, I hope he'll send me a picture. I want to believe you. I want to believe him. I had a guy bring up a good point that there is a cat-like critter down in South Texas called a jaguarundi, which is a cat-like critter that lives in deep South Texas, and they can be melanistic. Okay, so could a jaguarundi walk 900 miles to Arkansas or 500? Possibly. I had another guy say that he thinks Black Panther sightings are big otters, river otters, because a river otter is black and you don't see them very much, and they have big long tails. What do you think of that jaguarundi? All the guys are like looking at their phones.
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely.
I don't know about that.
Think about that at dark.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
If it's dark,
especially at dark.
Oh,
Dusk.
that is
it's like a
crazy
charcoal.
looking animal.
Okay,
Gray.
I believe in Black
It
Panthers.
looks like a mountain lion with a house cat's head.
Yeah.
Yep.
I never even heard of that until you just said it.
See if that's what Gary heard. Does that look like what you heard?
That's not black.
Well, but see,
But
the
it
thing
could
is,
be.
no,
It could be
that's the
melanist.
thing. There,
Yeah.
science has
Yeah,
documented.
what I heard was a Black Panther.
So that could have been melanistic. Gotcha. So, but the whole point of it is that jaguars and leopards can't have been documented as melanistic. The American mountain lion has never been documented as melanistic. And so to see a Black Panther would just be like, well, they're not here. So anyway, super fun. And guess what? I am the biggest proponent of Black Panther in North America. When those guys send me that stuff, I'm like, heck yeah, brother. Keep this thing alive. Yeah. Keep it alive. Long live the Black Panther, right? I love it.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. I don't know if you stopped in at an O'Reilly lately, but I use one because we have one right not too far from my house. People there are super helpful. I don't care if I'm getting boat batteries, car parts, whatever. Love those guys. They got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you don't have to worry if you're in a jam. The team at O'Reilly Auto Parts can test your battery for free, in or out of your car. If it needs to be replaced, they'll help you find just the right battery for your vehicle. If you need your windshield wipers replaced, a brake light fixed, quick service, they'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. Whether you are a car aficionado or an auto novice, you will find the employees at O'Reilly Auto Parts to be knowledgeable, helpful, and best of all, friendly. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things do-it-yourself auto. You can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater.
Whitetail Institute launched the food plot revolution in 1988 with a concentration on research and real-world testing of forage products specifically for whitetail deer. Whitetail Institute's research and development team of agronomy experts provide effective, personalized service. I've been using Imperial whitetail clover for a long time in a food plot back behind my house. In 2007, I killed the biggest buck of my life over an Imperial whitetail clover small quarter-acre food plot. Imperial whitetail clover is the only clover scientifically developed through years of selective breeding. Clover extreme genetic stability provides extreme cold tolerance, disease, and drought tolerance. It really does. Clover is coated with Whitetail Institute's Rain Bond, a polymer coating added for enhanced seedling survivability. They have an exclusive offer for Bear Grease listeners, 15% off Imperial Clover when you use the code BEAR at whitetailinstitute.com. That's whitetailinstitute.com and use code BEAR for 15% off. Sport Dog is the most recognized brand in the hunting dog training industry. Born in 2003 in Knoxville, Tennessee, Sport Dog was forged by a passionate group of hunters and dog trainers who intimately understood the challenges of the field and the special connection between hunters and their dogs. The people at Sport Dog know that having a well-trained hunting dog is more than just having a reliable partner. It's a commitment to their safety and unlocking their full potential. The Sport Dog promise to customers is simple: gear the way you design it. Every product Sport Dog builds is meticulously designed and rigorously tested in the field, ensuring it withstands the toughest conditions you and your dog may encounter. Trust Sport Dog, where innovation meets passion, to elevate your hunting experience and strengthen the bond with your local companion. Using tracking equipment on my squirrel and coon dogs is extremely important to me to track my squirrel dogs and my one old coon dog that's not very good. Get 20% off your first purchase using the code BEARGREASE. Go to www.sportdog.com/beargrease to learn more.
Any further comments on episode number 1? That was, I can tell you from like a creative standpoint, just kind of like behind the scenes of that podcast, that was the first I built that podcast like in January or something. You know, it just came out like in April. And I had all these interviews and I had no idea how they would stitch together to tell a story. And when Phil Taylor at MeatEater did it all, put it all together, and I had edited all the little sections and put it together, man, I was so excited when I heard it. I was just driving down the road and just listened to it, and I was like, yes, that is what I want to do with Bear Grease. You know, like tell these interesting stories about rural culture, and they're not always going to be about hunting. Like that podcast didn't have anything at all. I mean,
it was good because it gave a lot of depth to everything. It wasn't just I saw this when I was 19. There was a whole lot of build up and basis to all the claims, and eyewitness reports, and then somebody to set back an unbiased view and look at all of it and say, you may have seen something, but the possibilities of it being this particular color or that particular animal, it's while not impossible, highly improbable. Yeah. And they just give food for thought.
Yeah, and if by unbiased you mean Myron's section, I can support it. Clay was far from unbiased.
Yeah.
You know what I really liked about it was it kind of made me, and this is probably one of the most naive things I'll say, but it just seems like when we weren't so detached from the land and from wild places, that it might have been easier to trust one another. When you talk about trusting your brother and trusting your fellow man, when the biggest, argument or polarizing, one of them is, are there Black Panthers or not, or are there mountain lions? Whereas there's so many things today in our current age that it just seems like it inhibits that so much more.
Well, that was 30 years ago, man, almost. And, I've never had an outlet to even, tell that story or in any setting that was.
When you saw your mountain lions was 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Almost 30 years
Allegedly.
ago.
And your old friend Clay was the only one who cared.
He's the only one that listened.
And then he tried to sell you some soap.
Hey, so right here on this is a surprise. Y'all don't know what this is.
That's a big set of
Episode
sheds.
number 3 of the Bear Grease podcast was the Shedhorn buck of 1962.
Oh, those
Are
James?
With
those
my
James
dear
Lawrence's?
friend, James Lawrence.
Oh,
That's
man.
his sheds?
This is
The deer sheds.
This is the buck.
He gave those to you?
Okay. I refused to allow him to give them to me.
Does he know you have those? That's what we should be asking.
Man, I was at James's house, and this is before he'd even heard the podcast, and he just said, take those home with you. And he also allowed me, turn around and look up here. So on the ceiling of my office, there's a picture of my dad, Gary Newcomb, with his first buck. There's a picture of Steve Schultz, who's my father-in-law, and there's a picture of James Lawrence back in the mountains of Arkansas with a buck. And that buck that's hanging on the wall is a buck that James Lawrence killed on one of his big solo hunts back in the 70s. No, he killed that one in the 60s. He was like 21 years old when he killed it. Those 3 guys are my heroes. That's why they're there. And there's like 16 by 20 frame pictures. And what's so cool is they were all about the same age in that picture. So, Dad, how old were you? That's Dad's first buck.
Oh, 26, 27, something like that.
So you were older than that when it was 1978.
I'm just glad
You'd
you
have
have
been 30,
more than a towel
30.
on.
You were 30 years old.
Yeah.
I'm glad he's wearing clothes.
Well, no. Maybe.
77.
I started 77.
29.
Yeah.
Born 48.
Yeah. I wasn't like most of these listeners. I didn't start hunting until real late in life because my dad was so much like Clay. You didn't want to hang around him, man. He'd kill you hunting.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd go with him, and it's like, come on, Dad, it's time to go home. And we just getting started. So I quit.
Yeah. So Dad started bow hunting when he was in his late 20s. But you grew up bird hunting and stuff with your dad, but he kind of burned you out of it.
Yeah, I had to lay rules down when I got a little older that, hey, we're only going for 4 hours.
So there's Dad's picture. And then Steve Schultz, my father-in-law, he was a falconer. And that picture was taken in the late 70s in Florida. And Steve's had an incredible influence on my life, and then James, who in his own unique way has had a significant impact on his life. But this is the shed horn buck that he picked up these sheds.
Those actual sheds are from the 60s, man. Those look great.
He picked up these sheds in the early 1960s. And actually, he told me that he made a set of rattling horns out of one pair because he's got 3 sets of sheds, but he can only find 2. And this is actually 2 different years' sheds. I'm holding a left antler and a right antler. Huh. So this was the buck the year before. If you really dissected and held it, you could see a difference in mass and tine length. This was the buck at his prime. Okay, this is a left antler, a 5-point side. People can go to my Instagram and see a picture of James and me with these deer. Okay, I scored this buck, this side, as a shed 10, 12 years ago. And I just remembered that it scored around 170. And that's what I said on the podcast. I kind of got to, not doubting myself, but I was just like, man, I wonder if that thing, I just kind of was like, I ought to rescore that thing just to make sure. I'm interested in the facts, boys. You can tell that.
Why did you invite us?
Just the facts.
Yeah. I scored this right before you guys came, and that shed has 80 inches of antler on it.
Wow.
Which
really?
80 inches would be 80 times 2,
Right.
which would be 160 plus the spread.
Yeah.
So this would have been a mid-170s whitetail.
Right.
It's deceptive, though. It's got a 22-inch main beam, 11 inches, 10.5, 7.5, 5.5, plus 2 kickers, plus 4-inch mass all the way out, ends up being 80 inches. So but that's the horn. Here, pass
That's
it around.
pretty sporty.
So to a non-hunter, this is like a prized. If you were to kill this buck, this would be a prize.
None of
buck.
us in this room have ever killed a deer that big.
Wow.
Much less how many years ago in Arkansas.
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's one of the big things
That's
about
right.
it is the ecosystem in Arkansas that many decades ago.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah.
a
It
unicorn.
That is an absolute anomaly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That set of antlers might as well have been growing out right in the middle of his head,
Yeah.
like a white-tailed unicorn.
That's right.
For real.
And
That's what they
James,
called me in high
after
school.
60 years of hunting, they called you the unicorn? Or
White-tailed unicorn. Is that what this is about? You wanted to talk about my high school days?
This is you. No. Yeah, so Malachi, that would be like just a really nice white-tailed deer. And no, what'd you guys think of that podcast?
It was great. I listened to it again yesterday.
Did you really?
I did.
You know what I thought? How wonderful was it for him to have that story and that? Talk about. Same with are there Panthers or not? You want to be trusted. You want to trust your fellow man. Basically, none of his family trusted him.
Right.
But then
Right.
for you to do that podcast and have all these conversations with him, that had to be healing for him. Is kind of what I was taken away from him.
What struck me about it was that he was not a mainstream hunter. He did something different than everybody else. All the hunters that knew how to hunt, had all the experience, were out running dogs. And James is sitting there going, now I saw a deer out here.
Right.
And he pursued his own thing. And in a way, if, I don't hunt bucks like that. It's just too boring for me. So I'm not going to kill a deer like this unless it's an accident.
They're also really heavy to carry out of the woods.
Yeah, that's right. You've been with me when I picked the little doe instead of the big doe.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've had a chance of killing a deer close to that, but
Yeah.
it didn't work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
That's a great point. And see, the whole point of that podcast to me was that James took something that was negative and turned it into something positive. Going back to insight in unlikely places. Like, that would have crushed most people. And did James. It was a little bit tricky for me because James trusts me so much, I feel like. Like, he would just tell me whatever I asked him to tell and wouldn't question what I was going to do with that information.
If you told him you'd seen a mountain lion, he'd believe you.
He would believe me. He's never seen one. James Lawrence has never seen a mountain lion.
I believe him.
Off
I believe
subject.
him.
But, there was some pretty deep stuff there. And I was drawing conclusions about, him, that impacted him in a negative way. But he didn't get bitter about it. And I said this before, he is the guy that you want with you when you're successful. So, he didn't go and oppress people even more like he was oppressed. Like he just instinctively was just like, man, I'm not going to ever let that happen to one of my friends.
Hey, you know one thing, too. You take Malachi that's not hunted much, and you kill a big buck. He doesn't even know it.
Right.
I mean, those guys might have come at that a little more honest than what we think.
I see.
It might not have been, I'm kind of jealous of James for killing it. It could have been they just thought, man, we're out here for the meat. We're trying to survive.
Yeah.
You know, forget the horns. I'm worried about my belly.
Yeah.
You know, I can see that. I think that makes sense. If you got a group of guys who are not hunting for sport and there's a socially accepted way to obtain sustenance, and he's going against the grain
in the quickest way possible.
Yeah. That kind of, you know, I didn't feel like at all in the podcast though that his family were like demonized or anything, but it makes a little more sense as to why. I couldn't figure out why are they so unkind to this kid.
Yeah,
you know, why doesn't some of the men in his life come and be like, man, that's awesome. What you're doing is great.
That's where it was a little bit touchy, and I had to be careful. And I actually asked a few people before. I said, "Do you think that would hurt? Do you think?" I mean, I didn't want to disclose more than, but James is the one that said it. You know, I mean, like he just told the story, and he was kind of discounted, and that is also pretty normal too. I mean, like to kind of discount a kid when they're saying something. Sure. And James has the utmost respect for his family too. And you could tell that at the first of the podcast when he was talking about his grandmother and grandfather, how much he respected them and how they never said anything negative about anybody. Man, that's James. But from if we're talking about the Bear Grease podcast and kind of forecasting where this thing's going to go, these first 6 episodes I think are all very diverse. You think about it. Like we explore this like folklore of the myth of the Southern Mountain Lion. Every podcast I have an expert, like a biologist or a academic guy or just someone who's a subject matter expert. And then the idea is also that we're interviewing in the field people that have information about the topic, like Brent and Dad seeing mountain lions. And then Daniel's like waving his hand. He's like, "Well, I wasn't on the first
Daniel.
one." No, and every podcast is going to have kind of this similar structure, but all going to be very different. Like this folklore about mountain lion and a biology lesson, and then the next one we're talking about the correlation between being a good owl hooter and a turkey hunter, and talking about calling turkeys. There's Dr. Nails.
Horrible.
You did good, man. You did good.
I did my best.
Yeah. Well, you're getting there. And then the third podcast was the Shedhorn Buck in 1962, which was just this guy's story. And then the fourth podcast was Death of a Bear Hunter, which was
fantastic.
Man.
Okay, that one was a historically based podcast about a guy in a book and one single story out of the book, but we painted the context of the whole scene. You listen to that podcast, you understand what's going on in the 1830s in Arkansas. You understand who Gerstocker was. You understand a little bit about Native Americans that he was hunting with. And like, what did y'all think of that one?
I got a bone to pick with you on that.
Okay. Hold this deer horn while you're doing it.
3 years. This is a weapon.
Okay, pass the deer horn if you want to talk.
3 years ago, 3 years ago, you said, "Brent, have you ever seen this book?"
Wild Sports in the Far West by Frederick Gerstocker.
Yeah, that one. Never heard of it. He said, "You got to read it." He said, "And this is why I want you to read it." Now, this is 3 years ago. He says, "I want you to read this book, and when you get done, you and I are going to do a podcast on this."
I heard him say it. I was there.
So I buy this book, and I read this thing from cover to cover. I can speak German now.
And it's 400 pages, right?
Yeah. And then the next thing I know, when the podcast comes out, I'm like, I don't hear myself on there. That doesn't even sound like me.
So basically, I gave you an assignment to do a book report, and then there was no book report.
I have never got a grade. It was absolutely, it was incredible though, man. That book, I sent that book to my brother, and both of my nephews, I think, have read it now. It's an incredible book.
Yeah,
I passed the horn.
Hey. Well, you read it too, Dan.
Yeah, I did.
Now, why you read it years ago when I just told you the story?
Well, we were on a bear hunt together, and something had reminded you of the story, and Clay retold the story. And the way that I remembered it was you got to kind of the climax of the story, and this gentleman gets knocked out. Everything goes black, wakes up, his hunting buddy's dead. I mean, it's just this amazing story. And I went and got the book and read it, and it was just fantastic.
It was good.
Yeah.
Well, that story has been on my mind for years. I mean, that's the reason I told it. But we're going to replicate that into other podcasts with historical stories. And I've already got some ideas that I cannot share. I'll share with you guys after this.
You got a few books you want Brent to read?
Yeah.
I'm
Brent,
getting something in writing.
Yeah. What, Josh, your thoughts on that one?
Well, I
Or
listened to
Malachi,
that
I
one
don't
a
know
couple of times. I loved when you're reading that story, you are transported into what is happening, and Gerstacker does such a great job.
Josh is German.
Does such a great job describing the scene.
Yeah.
It's like, who needs Netflix when you got that?
Yeah.
And you mentioned this, I think maybe on the podcast, but a lot of the places that he talked about in that book, I've been. It's between here and where I live in central Arkansas.
Yeah.
Up and down the Little Red River.
Well, I was
it
serious
was
when I
amazing.
said on the podcast I was offended at people that I didn't know that story till I was 30 years old. I'm serious. I'll tell you where
Did
I was
Mo
at.
know it? Did
I
Mo
was
know
not
about
in
it?
this country. I was in another country reading a book in a hotel room. And I had no idea that, this college professor had said, hey, there's some stories about Arkansas bear hunting there. That's all I said. Terrible marketing. Like the first half of the book, the guy's not even in Arkansas. So I'm just kind of like, oh, this is cool. I mean, it's cool, but like I wanted Arkansas stuff. And when I get to that story, I'm not kidding. I remember where I was sitting when I read that story, and I was just like, holy cow.
So you didn't know he was eventually coming to
I didn't
Arkansas.
know that he was. Well, no. All I knew was that there's some Arkansas bear stories. I had no idea that it was just right down the road.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why don't we know that?
Yeah.
Why don't they teach this in Arkansas public schools? Why? And like, it's just. And the truth is there's stuff like that littered all across history. Like wherever the people that are listening to this live, stuff happened right where they live.
Yeah,
that
history is made every day.
Substantial. Made every day.
This guy, hand him the horn.
Yeah, give him the horn.
Golly.
No, okay, going back to the insight, like bear grease can give you insight beyond what you would have thought it would, is that I really have had the question of why does that story impact me so much? Like why? And that was my exploration inside of that podcast is why do stories impact us? Because that story has no consequence on my life in a rational sense. Like a guy got killed by a bear out here with dogs. But that guy's story has shaped my family. And it's just, and then the conclusion was humans are massively impacted by stories, whether you want to or not. And so you got a choice of what stories you let impact you. Netflix tells stories. That's what Netflix is in the business of telling stories.
Modern
Amazon
day cave
Prime.
painting.
Absolutely. And so like, and you could say, well, Clay, why are you letting a story about a English guy you didn't know getting killed by a bear, like impact your family? Like that's kind of aside from the point in that it's like, we get to choose what impacts us and how it impacts us. And I would like if Gerstacker had just been a dirtball, that story, like if he had just been known as like an outlaw and like a scrupulous character,
Right.
like I wouldn't have had respect. I respected the guy. He did love people. Like I said on the podcast, when he left Conwell's house, like these were people that he had just met. He couldn't even speak their same language that well. And he cried when he left Conwell's house. He said Conwell had hair as white as snow, and he loved his family. And he went into, how he stayed with them, and they begged him to stay. And it just like, I like it. I like that guy. Mm-hmm. And then just his insightfulness. And he wasn't like a conservation hero. Like I wasn't trying to paint Gerstacker as a conservation hero, but he did have insight that the market hunting of the times of which he participated in was unsustainable. And like, so that then becomes like a stamp on that story. And like, when I think of that, I think of, man, we'll never do that again. He was hunting bears in February in dens.
Right.
And it's like, man, that was really cool. We ain't doing that no more.
You ought to quit.
I mean, there are stories in that book of them crawling into dens, crawling in caves with lit, they call them torches, but pine kindling split, climbing into caves, killing a sow bear, and then smacking cubs up against a rock to kill them.
Yeah.
I mean, like, they were in the business of killing stuff. And it's like, that did happen. That's not good. It's not going to happen again because it happened then. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like me, like, talking about conservation-based bear hunting where we're highly selective and we're trying to target these older, mature males. That happened because Gerstocker, who didn't know any better, was clubbing, baby bears over the head. I mean, for lack of a better term.
He probably went
Do you
to
see what I'm
Alaska
saying?
and clubbed baby seals too.
Yeah.
Well,
You're next.
Listen, we have the right as humans to correct our paths and learn from our past.
Absolutely.
It's like James Lawrence, redemption inside of something that was negative.
Well, you recognize that is obsolete, and you have to be able to recognize the obsolescence of that thing and move on and say this worked for the time. It's no longer relevant.
Yeah, yeah. And we'd still be doing that today if we hadn't. Well, we wouldn't because bears would be gone.
And they were for a long time.
They were in Arkansas. Okay, closing comments here, Dan. I'm going to throw this horn to you, and then
Holy
you'll
cow.
get to speak. Just what do you think?
I'm going to say overall, the podcast is solidly mediocre. No. I think as I've been listening to them and really enjoying them, I think, when you think about podcasts and stories, a lot of today's kind of stories and podcasts either are really critiquing a part of life in usually not a very beneficial way, or it's trying to kind of escape life, as it is. And I feel like what I really like about what you're doing is I leave having listened to one of your podcasts and I'm thinking about how I see things and how I relate with people and choices that I make. And to me, it helps me feel more connected. It's your insight. You're giving insight from unlikely places. And I feel like that is what I walk away with.
Yeah, I like it.
I think about where this all started with me and you. And we were in Oklahoma on a bear bait, and I was running the camera. And we'd been sitting there for that one day for a week, it seemed like, and hadn't seen a bear. And you turned away from me, and I was looking off back to the left. I was sitting to the left of Clay. And when I turned back around, you had taken mud, and I assumed water, and covered your face in mud. And I thought, how did I get here? I've carried 40 pounds of camera equipment on the side of this mountain in the Ouachita Mountains, and this guy has just put mud all over his face.
Are you sure it wasn't feces?
No, I don't know what it was, but I thought this guy'll never go anywhere. But look what you've done, buddy. I'm very proud of you for what it's turned into, and the drive. I say that facetiously about knowing you weren't going to go anywhere. The drive you had has been outstanding. It's inspired me to do a lot of stuff too, and I just appreciate you letting me come along for the ride.
Right on, man.
Yeah, as the non-hunter in the group, I think hearing the podcast and watching you tell people stories, I think it's a very powerful tool to continue the legacy and culture and give people who haven't had that exposure a correct way of seeing things. I think hunting, I think the Southern culture, I think Arkansas has, nationally not a good rep.
Yeah.
And hearing the stories and seeing how you hunt, and it's being driven by principles and patterns and the way that you share, the way that you've been influenced by your dad, the way that you influence your kids. I think it's a powerful medium and tool to give people a cleaner, more pristine, more correct picture of hunting, of Arkansas, of the South, of relationships, of everything that is built inside of a commodity that was once, valuable but is lost. And so bringing that back and giving people a better picture of that, I think is awesome.
Yeah. It's good.
Well, I think that I've really enjoyed the podcast. And I think just having known you for a lot of years, I appreciate, first of all, like Malachi said, I appreciate the relational aspect of the podcast. I think when it all boils down to it, it's relationship that makes us rich. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to connect with people and to draw stories from people, I think storytelling and the ability to draw stories out of people, that thing has been lost. In a sense that shows the depth of what's been built in people over a long journey. And so I think to be able to hear that from you, who have a passion to mine that out, I think it's valuable for people to be able to hear. And so I'm really looking forward to the future podcasts and the things that I get to learn by listening. And yeah, man, I think it's great.
And you eagerly await being on the Bear Grease podcast.
Eagerly render, and I might become so popular on the render that I don't need to be on the Bear Grease podcast.
See. That's a great point.
Hey, this is good for this.
We're passing the deer horn. Dad, what do you think, man?
Well, I hate to burst your stinking bubble, but
Go mow the yard.
These guys are obviously on the payroll, and I am really disappointed in you, Daniel. I think you sort of have a spiritual, religious background, and it's obvious again that you hadn't been vaccinated against Lyme. That's Britt's deal. I just loved it on the podcast when he's talking about coon hunters. But when I listen to it, I look at it from a dadly standpoint. That's a new word.
Dadly. We'll take it.
It's just like when you were a kid. Your brain's not totally formed. I mean, you miss about half the good stuff. It's like on the deal with the dogs. I mean, nowhere did you mention that the dog is your best friend. But why is he your best friend? It's because he loved you first. Mm-hmm. He's the only animal that loves you more than him. And I mean, you didn't even cover that. I mean, I was embarrassed. I'll be honest with you. It was embarrassing that you went into all that rhetoric and didn't mention the love that dog has for you. And if you look at life, in a way, I'm serious about the love. I think you can detect that. But I only love people that love me. And if they have the ability to show me that they love me first, they expose themselves. It's like I'm open.
Vulnerable.
Vulnerable is the word. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's a powerful tool is love. Yeah. And people that have enough confidence to expose themselves to, hey, and a dog does it immediately.
Yeah.
Now, how that came from a wolf to a domesticated dog, but it's really powerful. But no, really, all these podcasts, they're different than a lot that I've heard where you have a lot of meat, a lot of science, a lot of humor, all of it mixed up into a recipe that is pretty entertaining and educational.
Yeah.
So obviously,
I need to tune
you
a
take
dial in
after
a few
your mother
things.
instead of your daddy.
There you go, Clay. Pretty entertaining.
Well, guys,
It's a solid 6.
it's a solid. Gary Newcomb gives the Bear Grease podcast a 2 stars on iTunes. Hey, listen,
There's room for
real.
growth.
Okay. Hey, I need people to leave iTunes reviews on the Bear Grease podcast. So this is my unashamed solicitation for all our listeners to go to iTunes. And apparently that drives the needle on these podcasts with the higher ups, So I'm asking everybody out there, do me a favor and just, you can do as little as just giving it stars. But the best thing to do would be to leave a comment. Just say what you think. That would help us. And I thank my guests so much for being here. Really, you guys mean the world to me, all of you, so that's why you're here. Check out Brent's podcast, Nightlife Nation. Brent's got a coon hunting podcast. Check out Josh on Instagram, Kiki and the Beard. Nobody else has any big social platforms.
I have Twitter.
Yeah,
but it's all education stuff.
You're on the Twitter. But again, if you hadn't been paying attention, we're going to do this every other week. So the Bear Grease podcast will come out every other week. The Bear Grease Render, which is us just shooting the bull. And it'll be a different, it might be different people, it might be the same people. Y'all may never want to come back. Brent drove 3 hours to be here. Did y'all know that? Gary drove 2. Yeah.
2.5.
2.5.
He'll never get those 2.5 back.
No, thank you guys so much. And I can't wait for the next episode. Keep the wild places wild, because that's where the bears live, and that's where you get bear grease.
You know what? When Malachi left the house this morning, he thought he had the coolest socks on. Till I left.
He was dog socks.
Those are coon dogs, buddy.
Those are coon dog socks.
Oh, me. How crazy.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.